Great win for Lewis Hamilton. Again, driver of the day, fastest lap from the pole, came in for a safety pit stop at the end, got the soft tyres on. Bit of a discussion about whether he should put the softs on, go for fastest lap, put the hards on, be conservative, but just have enough margin there in case anything ever happened. That was about the only thing that happened all day from Lewis's point of view. Easy start. Valtteri was terribly slow off the line, reacted to a light coming on in the dash, realised it wasn't the start, start. And then Seb Vettel, who escaped a penalty for a similar thing in Japan last year, nonetheless told his crew that Valtteri had jumped the start. And so Lewis got a clear run down into turn one. And then mirrors were just empty. The only thing was just blue flags, cars that he was lapping, including the two Ferraris, ignominiously Sebastian Vettel at the end of the race. Charles Leclerc absolutely nowhere. So Ferrari to be lapped around Hungary is, well, words escape me really. But of course we did have a spark from Max Verstappen, who finished second. Fabulous drive from Max. The Red Bull, remember, isn't a great car at the moment, and it was a very difficult knife-edgy car to drive both in the wet and the dry in the build-up to this race on the Friday and the Saturday. And Max lost it going onto the grid, turn 12. I mean, it happens to the great drivers. So if ever it happens to you, Formula Ford, club racing, whatever you might be doing, don't be ashamed. It happened to Max Verstappen. Went off, hit the tyre wall, smashed the front wing, had to drive over the front wing, left front suspension was broken, left front track rod looked to be broken more than anything. Drove up onto the grid and got out of the car, obviously very monosyllabic, very apologetic. I counted 14 team members at Red Bull just working in harmony, just beautiful to watch. This is Formula One at its very best, when you see a team like Red Bull working under pressure like this from both sides of the garage and getting everything on the car perfectly in time for the race start. And after that, Max delivered with a P2. Thanks mainly to Valtteri making such a slow start, but Max under a lot of pressure in the late race phase when Valtteri was on new tyres and he was right behind him. At one point, it was quite funny, Max said, where is Bottas? They said, well, he's right behind you. Shows how much he'd been looking in his mirrors. Yeah, absolutely brilliant from Max Verstappen. And yeah, who would have thought going into this race at the end of qualifying that he would be second? That was just a great result for Red Bull, beating Valtteri, who won't be happy with that. Mercedes won't be happy that they didn't get their 1-2. They should have. They had the class car in the field. And it was amazing actually how difficult Valtteri was finding it in the traffic in the early stage of the race to do anything really, to do any passing. I suppose it's not that amazing if you take into account how difficult it is to overtake in Hungary. But even so, the margin that Mercedes are currently enjoying over their opposition is so vast that you would have thought it would have been easier for him than it was. But anyway, he finished third, which wasn't the end of the world, but a great drive by Max Verstappen. What else to say? Well, Racing Point, I think, did a very good job with Lance Stroll. Fourth, really, in those conditions, in those circumstances, was about all they were going to get. Lance drove really well. There was a lot of pressure. He was very quick relative to everybody around him. He did the job. Sergio Perez made a terrible start, also like Valtteri, from the damp side of the grid and kind of recovered, but it took him a long time. Probably, I'm guessing he still isn't feeling 100% physically. But from Racing Point's perspective, this was a very good race. They both scored points and they were both in there in the mix. I mean, there was absolutely no question that the Racing Point was a much, much quicker car than the Ferrari, than the McLaren, than anything else around them, apart from a Max Verstappen-driven Red Bull. I was quite impressed actually on the formation lap when Lance got on the radio and said, they're all on intermediates at this point, and it was obviously still damp, and he said, can you tell me please if you see any of my competitors, he called them, which is quite charming, I thought, any of my competitors are using interesting or different lines to me, I want to know about it. And I thought that was quite good. That shows this is a driver that has enough brain capacity to be able to go to somebody like Rob Wilson and work with him, and equally to be able on the formation lap say, look, I'm not going to get this perfect. If I can learn anything in the early stages from you, let me know. And that's quite unusual, and I think speaks to why Lance Stroll is starting to do a really good job in that team. I think the other major point about today was that it could have been a much better race had more teams done what Haas did. The end of the formation lap, put the slicks on the car and get out there. You can argue that the cars at the back of the grid have less to lose and therefore they can take the gamble. I don't buy that. If you are running Ferrari right now and you're getting beaten by Mercedes, Racing Point, Red Bull, McLaren, why wouldn't you put both Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc on slicks? I just don't get that. if it worked for Haas, for sure it would have worked for Ferrari. And I think that's an example of what is wrong, or one of the things that's wrong with Ferrari at the moment. They're not doing things like that. They're not thinking on their feet. I don't think Red Bull could have been expected to have done that for Max Verstappen with everything else that was going on. Maybe you could for Alex Albon, but a little bit iffy given the fact that Alex might have hit the odd curb and might have spun. But with Ferrari, you got Vettel and Leclerc. Why wouldn't you put them on slicks? I just don't get that. And I think that's so sad because they just sunk in the race. And Sebastian Vettel did a much better job. Better job is the wrong way to phrase this, because there's no doubt Charles Leclerc drove his heart out in the race today, but he was really slow. He was struggling. He couldn't stay with the Haas's, even when they were on the same tyres. He couldn't race with a McLaren. He was really slow. So Sebastian did a very good job if the car is that bad. But nonetheless, overall, it was an appalling day for Ferrari. So why not just flick the coin and go for them on slicks? At least give them some track position that they wouldn't have got otherwise. Anyway, that's my rant. Again, my Ferrari rant post-race from Hungary on that point. Daniel Ricciardo drove really well. Again, if you were Renault and you had Daniel Ricciardo, wouldn't you have brought him in as well and put him on slicks and get him out there to take advantage when everybody else is on the intermediates to get some track position as well? Daniel was driving really well. The Renault wasn't too bad at all. If they just had a bit more track position, he could have finished a lot higher than he did. And as it was, he was 8th. So a very good drive from Daniel and an excellent drive from Kevin Magnussen. There was I saying team shambles yesterday when describing Haas. Well, just one decision, and I give the credit there to Günther Steiner because I do think he can think on his feet. A great decision to bring both drivers in on the formational lap, put them under slicks, and Kevin Magnussen rewarded with a position in the points. And obviously it's not easy in the first couple of laps on slicks to get through, but both Kevin and Roma, like Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc, have the ability to be able to do that. They have the car control. And they made full use of it. A relatively difficult day for McLaren. Carlos Sainz finished 10th, Lando Norris 13th. Not quite where they were in Austria, of course, but nonetheless, they're right there or thereabouts. They're not going to have a really competitive high midfield car at every circuit. But here, they got the best out of it in the conditions they had, I think. And they can go away from here saying, well, at least we're quicker than Ferrari. Yeah, and a lot of teams can do that right now, which is very, very worrying for Formula One. I wish I could say more actually about the job Lewis Hamilton has done and is doing and did today in Hungary. It's very easy, I think, for the critics on the outside to say, well, he's got this amazing advantage and if only other drivers had a car like that. Well, of course, it's not that simple, is it? Because you get into the team and you work with the people around you and you get the car to be the way you want it to be. And if you just happen also to be about as good as anybody in the world as a racing driver, perhaps the best in the world, you are going to make that the best racing car. It stands to reason, providing you've got enough resources behind you. And that's exactly what Lewis has done. What he hasn't done is go to Mercedes and expect them to give him the car. He's integrated himself at Mercedes in such a way that they completely understand what he needs in order to be quick. And that is a very, very difficult thing to achieve. Michael Schumacher did it, Jackie Stewart did it, Niki Lauda did it, Alan Prost to some extent did it. But here's Lewis Hamilton showing how it is done in the 2020s. And it's really impressive to watch. He does make it look easy, but believe me, it's nothing of the kind. What we saw today in Hungary was the epitome of the art.